What's going on, everyone? Rachel West here along with Mark Topkin, and we're here at the Chop where we thought there might be a Game 5 here later on tonight, Mark, but unfortunately that's not the case. Rays had a disappointing early exit from the postseason. What was it, do you think, that ultimately did them in and was the reason that the Red Sox were able to take this series?
Well, I think there were a couple things, Rachel, and you can certainly look at their offense and say maybe they should have hit a little bit more. There were a couple plays that didn't get made. There was obviously one toward the end of Game 4 there. There was a really bad bounce, the correct call, but an unfortunate situation that worked against the Rays in that 13-inning game. But I think ultimately it was a lack of pitching, specifically starting pitching. They counted on their young starters. Shane McClanahan certainly delivered in Game 1, but they didn't get very much from Shane Baz in Game 2. They didn't get very much from Drew Rasmussen in Game 3. Then they went back to Shane McClanahan on a day short rest, a role he hadn't been in this year. And that obviously was a mess of a third inning for him. And, look, he gave up 5 runs. That put him in a huge hole. They did come back and tie it, so you could ultimately say that's not the reason they lost the game. But it certainly changed the dynamics of that game, put them in a difficult situation. They ended up losing on the walk-off. So, as they review this, I think the lack of, enough starting pitching or more experienced starting pitching, but somehow, however you want to cast it, that's what did them in the most.
And while obviously it was disappointing, they did have a 100-win season, and season as a whole is looked at as a success. But because of that early exit, does that take anything away from it?
I think you have to kind of look at it both ways. Kevin Cash, I thought, had a really good way to put it after the game on Monday night, and then Eric Neander stole his line and used it in the Tuesday wrap-up media session here. But he said, you can be both proud of what they did during the regular season and disappointed in how the postseason turned out. I think that's a good way to look at it. But this is a bottom-line business. They are in this to win championships. These players said, from spring training on, their goal was to get back to the World Series and win it this year. They obviously fell short. So I think in that regard, you do have to look at it as a bit of a disappointment to get knocked out in the first round by a wild card team that they finished 8 games better than, that they beat 11 out of the 19 times they played them this year. They win the first game, they're leading 5-2 in the second game. To let that get away, to lose to that team, I do think you have to look at it as a disappointment. This has happened to them before. They've been in the playoffs 7 times now. They've been knocked out in this round 5 times, and that hurdle is one they definitely have to find a way to get past. They've done it twice, obviously gotten to the World Series, not won it, but they want to win a World Series. They have to keep finding a way to get back here, and then also to get past this first round.
Well, this season, unfortunately, is over. It's in the books. But looking ahead to next season and years to come, there's a lot of excitement there. All the youth, everything else this team's got going for it. So what can we expect moving forward here and as soon as the next couple of months in the offseason?
Yeah, the Rays always make a lot of moves. They rarely sit still. This was a past offseason where they kept their position player group almost totally intact but changed almost their whole pitching staff. And so there'll be a lot of moves. This seems to me, as we sit here right now, that maybe this will be a winter of a lot of small moves. They've got to do a lot of roster clearing space. They've got 7 or 8 guys that have to come off the 60-day injured list and be reinstated to the 40-man roster. They've got 6 or 7 free agents that maybe there's a couple of those they're going to want to consider bringing back. They've got 19 players eligible for salary arbitration. And some of those aren't at a lot of money. Some of those are guys that they can certainly kind of do without. But a lot of things like that to handle. There will be some bigger decisions, too. Do they want to just roll with the younger starters? Do they want to bring in a veteran starter? Kevin Kiermaier's name came up in some trade talks this past offseason. He'll be their highest-paid player next year. That's something that they want to explore, trading him. They have an option on catcher Mike Zunino. I think that's going to be a pretty obvious one to pick that up, $7 million. He was a big part of their success this year. So I think this is going to be, like I said, a lot of moves. Maybe not some big ones, but then again, it's the Rays, so maybe there could be a big trade or two as well.
You never really know with them. Well, guys, it's sure to be a very busy offseason, so make sure you're keeping up with all of our coverage of it over on social media at Sports by Tampa Bay Times, as well as tampabay.com.